No one knows whose job it is to build housing. It doesn't say that in the city charter. It doesn't say that in the county charter. It doesn't say that in the state charter, right? So that blows my mind, right? Now that we have a housing crisis, everyone's like, not my job, not my job, not my job. It doesn't matter whose job it is, right? It's our collective responsibility now. So that's happening on one lane where no one's official charter or job description says you're supposed to build housing. So our county, Professor Kwan mentioned Measure A in 2016. That was the county saying to the world, we're going to make it our job. So that was the first housing bond of its kind that's ever passed. So Measure A at its rate was going to build 6,000 units of housing. We officially had a point in time count of 5,000 homeless individuals, unhoused individuals that we knew of. Because we know for every person that is unhoused in the streets, there's 5 more families that are housing insecure and they're about to be on the streets. They're only like 2 paychecks away. Most Americans are only 2 paychecks away from becoming homeless. So it's very fragile where we're at, right? Now we have to figure out now this is the bigger job. How do we prevent that? How do we prevent people from even getting, how do we prevent housing insecure folks from becoming homeless?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Only in Santa Clara County. We are a sister project of Only in San Jose, a civic education podcast series dedicated to demystifying and democratizing the process of local government and civic participation in Santa Clara County. My name is Ellina Yin, and I will be your host. Hello and welcome, everyone. Welcome to episode 8, where we will be talking about the 2016 Measure A Affordable Housing Bond. The clip that you just heard is of our co host, Betty Young. This was from a talk given in an Asian American Studies class taught by my wonderful friend, a brilliant friend, Dr. Yvonne Kwan at San Jose State University. This was one of the first times I actually heard Betty explaining how local government works, and it was definitely a moment that confirmed to me that Betty would be the co host for this season. And here we are, officially nearing the end of season 1. All right. Now, before we get into our Measure A interview that was taped in early 2024, as you know, I like to tell the whole story that goes beyond the breaking news moments that we often get highlighted in our news cycle. So, this story, the story of our housing crisis, is obviously not unique to Santa Clara County. It did not start here, nor did it start recently. But what did start here in Santa Clara County is ownership of the problem in a new kind of way. And as always, it starts with Santa Clara County residents, their advocacy, and their collective approval of said ballot measure. But before that, so now we're going to get into how Measure A came to be in the first place. So back in 2015, Destination Home, a local nonprofit, partnered with the County of Santa Clara to conduct the largest and most comprehensive study ever assembled in the United States to understand the true cost of homelessness in Santa Clara County. The report, titled Home Not Found, analyzed nearly 25 million pieces of public records to identify the annual cost of homelessness in this community. And this is before AI, y'all. So you can find this report in our show notes. This report outlines the costs of services provided to more than 100,000 county residents wrestling with long and short-term homelessness. The study found that more than 3 billion of county services were used by 104,206 homeless residents between 2007 and 2012. This equated to a cost averaging of $520 million per year. Medical diagnoses and the associated healthcare services were the largest component of homeless residents' overall public costs. The second largest component of their overall cost of homelessness was associated with justice system involvement. And if you remember our last 2 episodes, we talked about, the Office of Labor Standards Enforcement, and the true cost of wage theft is that taxpayers end up paying for it. According to a report from the National Employment Law Project in 2019, approximately $9.27 billion in wages was stolen from workers who earned less than $13 an hour, making wage theft the largest form of theft in the United States, costing workers billions of dollars annually. It's a problem that surpasses the economic impact of other traditional crimes like robbery, burglary, and motor vehicle theft combined. And so the opening of the Office of Labor Standards Enforcement was the county's way of beginning to address that problem, the problem of wage theft. And if you haven't checked out those episodes, I highly recommend it. For those of you who are new to the show, welcome. And yes, you can listen to these episodes independently. However, the show has been designed as an educational experience, and it's best understood when you listen in order. Okay, now back to Measure A and how the county is thinking about how it can approach the issue of our unhoused and our homeless population in a different way. So, the report Home Not Found revealed to the county that they had a significant opportunity to experiment with a preventative model by investing in preventative services that better serve the population and provided long term solutions to the homeless population. And that brings us to the 2016 Measure A Affordable Housing Bond. So, really quick, for those of you who are not familiar with our local government financing mechanisms, this is a little history lesson from our California legislature's nonpartisan fiscal and policy advisor, the Legislative Analyst Office, LAO. All right. So, what is a bond and what is bond financing? So, bond financing is a type of long-term borrowing that the state uses to raise money for various purposes. The state obtains this money by selling bonds to investors. In exchange, it agrees to repay the money with interest according to a specified schedule. And what do bonds fund? And why are they used? So, the state has traditionally used bonds to finance major capital projects such as roads, educational facilities, prisons, parks, office buildings, and water projects. And these are all public infrastructure related projects, so not commercial. Bonds have also been used to help finance certain private infrastructure, such as housing, which is what the Measure A Affordable Housing Bond is and what we'll be talking about. Another reason why bonds is because the large upfront dollar costs of these projects can be difficult to pay all at once. So, this serves as another way to finance said projects, much like a person would take out a mortgage to pay for their home. After selling each individual bond, the state makes annual principal and interest payments under the bond until it's paid off. The annual cost of repaying bonds depends primarily on the interest rate and the time period over which the bonds have to be repaid. The state typically pays back investors in each individual bond with a level payment over 30 years, a 30-year period. Again, very similar to the payments like homeowners would make in their 30-year fixed rate mortgages and bond civics lessons. All right. Now, here to tell us about the Measure A Affordable Housing Bond is our guest host for this season, Supervisor Betty Young. Now, prior to her current elected position, Betty actually served as the campaign manager for this measure. Betty also has over a decade of experience working at the County of Santa Clara. She started as a budget and policy director for the Office of Supervisor Cindy Chavez. Then she went on to become employee number one, the manager of the newly formed Office of Labor Standards Enforcement in 2017. And during the pandemic, Betty became the lead public information officer for the Emergency Operations Center for the COVID-19 response. Her last post was as chief of staff for Supervisor Ginny Chavez. And as of the most recent 2024 elections, Betty is now the elected member of the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors representing District 2, making history as the first Vietnamese American woman elected to the county. Again, this interview was recorded in early 2024 as a public service and was not part of her campaign. And that is the end of this intro. And I really hope you all enjoy this interview as much as I did.
Okay, so now we've covered kind of how Santa Clara County works, the structures, the mechanisms, and I wanted to end on what
what has been done on a county level, what we can do on a county level. So we're just going to talk about some projects, some recent projects. And so one of the first projects you had already mentioned in your introduction was Measure A. So what is, restating like what is Measure A and what was so significant, or did it set a precedent? Like what was it about, and what did it mean to the county?
Oh, all the things. All the things you just so 2016's Measure A is the affordable housing bond measure. It was at its time the boldest and the biggest and the most audacious housing bond measure that has ever been introduced. And it was really important to me to see this go across the finish line, which is why I took a leave of absence from my job, and I served as the campaign measure for the 2016 Measure A. We needed 66.67% of the voters to approve it, and we got by at 67.1%. So it wasn't just a majority, but it had to be a supermajority.
Yeah.
And that's how taxes work. Whenever you have a new tax or a new fee that would be applied to the whole population, it has to be a 2/3 majority, supermajority approval for that to happen.
Yeah.
Yep, says the book. Says the charter, says state law, says all the rules, right? And so heading into 2016 Measure A, when you talk about precedent setting, right? Other housing bond measures had been attempted at a much smaller scale, and they all had failed. They had failed at the 51% mark, the 55% mark. One failed at the 65% mark, which was, I can imagine for the team was heartbreaking. And I know this because as I was heading into election night, the smarty pants of policy making, the policy wongs were sending me all these outcomes, and I was like, "Why are you sending this to me?" And I was like, "Hey, just want you to know, if you fail tonight, it's not you."
Yeah.
I was pregnant throughout the whole campaign. I found on the second day of the campaign that I was carrying my first child. So I was like, I remember like calling my belly. I was like, "No, we're gonna make this happen. It's gonna happen." So aside from the numerical challenge of it all, right? When the voters approved overwhelmingly to support Measure A, that ushered in a new era of commitment and responsibility. Prior to 2016, it was no one's official job to care for the homeless, to build affordable housing, to build transitional housing. That had been like projects, here and there, individual projects, right, for specific populations, but they were much more few and further between compared to Measure A. And that's really because no county charter, no state charter, and no city charter says you, jurisdiction, shall be responsible for the care of the unhoused. The term forefathers comes to mind here, right? When people in power centuries ago created charters, created unincorporated areas, the homelessness crisis didn't exist at that time. And I remember having been born and raised in San Jose, that for everybody who's been born and raised in San Jose, have lived here for decades, or at least just lived here for some time, you'll see that this just the visibility of human suffering today just did not exist in this way 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And so prior to 2016, it was no one's job to build housing to support the unhoused. There was no one's job to ensure housing that was affordable for our working families, our seniors, our veterans, our small business owners, nurses, and teachers, right? It was not that. In 2016, with 2016 Measure A, the county says it will be my responsibility. We shall take on this task. We shall take on this role because it is critical and absolutely necessary to the future of our county, to our sustainability, and to the standard of care and living for our families in Santa Clara County. So since 2016, with your support, Measure A is on track to finish more than 4,300 units of affordable housing, long-term supportive housing. We have created a $50 million first-time home buyer assistance fund, so that our friends and community, our teachers, our our social workers, our nurses, our educators, right, are able to purchase their first home at a below market rate fee to provide this financial assistance that you don't have to pay back until the end of your 30-year mortgage or when you sell your property, whichever comes first. Through 2016 Measure A, we have been able to fund numerous support programs to make sure that we wrap ourselves around individuals who are unhoused and all the challenges and all the issues that have come from being unhoused or had led them to that point in their lives. And what I really hope to see next is that, 2016 Measure A has been expended. Every dollar has been accounted for. We have one of the most stringent oversight auditing committees headed up by our county assessor, Larry Stone, who is the chair of the Measure A Oversight Committee.
Okay.
There's quarterly audits of Measure A are done on a quarterly basis.
Okay.
Because it's $950 million. This $950 million of earmarked for brick and mortar construction also draws down $2 billion annually worth of state and federal services that the state and federal pays for, right? Because we built the housing, these programs come along with it. And so it's heavily audited. We got an award, I think last year for out auditing the auditors. And so every dollar is accounted for and has been earmarked, tagged, and expended. So what's on the table now, what you folks may be hearing about in the near future is that there's a lot of discussions now amongst the 9 Bay Area counties for a regional housing bond measure. Something like Measure A, but on a larger scale.
Wow.
So we talk about precedent setting. In all the ways, it has redefined the county's role and when in relation to housing and also the city's roles. A lot of our Measure A dollars, when we talked about apportioning taxes, a lot of our Measure A dollars was also apportioned to the city jurisdictions for construction of affordable housing in their districts.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And in talking about, Measure A and what we're able to start on a local level is sometimes I feel like when we watch the news, we get a little dissociated from the suffering of the world that I hear many people feel helpless beyond voting.
Yeah.
But there's so much that happens on a county and local level, and also kind of sharing the opportunities of how people can get involved in this regional bond measures. And so if they wanted to, one of them is, attending the Board of Supervisor meeting, but what else can people do for their niche interest in,
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. I think keeping in touch with your local representative. So, I mean, you live in Santa Clara County, you have a county supervisor. Being in touch with that office, every county supervisor office, I would say every city council office, every elected office now, because of the state of affairs of the world today, will have at least one person leading on housing policy, if not multiple people, right? So if you call your elected representative who represents you in your district, find out from them who's your lead person on housing. I'd love to know more about, do you have a listserv, a mailing list? Do you have, every office does it a little bit differently, but I would explore with that office. Like, I really care about housing. How can I get involved? The other way is that there's a lot of community coalitions that have been stood up, has been structured, right? We have the Housing Action Coalition. We have the South Bay YIMBY group, Yes in My Backyard, who closely follows housing policy and down to like the planning and coding level, right? Like, how do we create more spaces for more high density housing? Where would it'd be smart to grow that type of housing? So I would follow that, and I would also follow like transportation. So the board of supervisors and our VTA board, that's another jurisdictional body. VTA, BART, the MTC, like these are all acronyms for local and regional transportation authorities. And they all work together. And what we're on the precipice of is, and you've already seen some of the construction happening already, but there are plans to extend BART and light rail, right? Light rail to East San Jose, BART through downtown, connecting us and then looping around to connect us to the larger Bay Area for the efficient, reliable transportation of people, right? And what that means is that as we're ripping up roads to lay down tracks, there is an opportunity and this is where it ties in transportation housing.
Mhm.
There's an opportunity to build mixed use, high density housing,
Mhm.
right? Can we have retail on the street level,
Mhm.
housing up top, right?
Yeah.
Units for single families, units for individuals, right?
Mhm.
And for me, that's very exciting because when you build high density housing, when you build mixed use housing along transportation hubs,
Mhm.
you create walkable communities.
Mhm.
Walkable communities are safer communities.
Mhm.
They are communities that thrive, communities where small businesses are flourishing, families have spaces. We have, and we have this mass transportation movement of people to
Mhm.
be able to experience other parts of the Bay Area and the
Yeah.
city.
Yeah.
So it's a very exciting time. We're like on the verge of that right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I haven't ridden the new BART yet, but it's been open for a minute now.
It's right down the street. The Barrier Support's right down the street from me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's it. That's where if you really want to look at housing,
Mhm.
of course, follow like the news, right?
Mhm.
Whenever there's news stories about it, there's an opportunity to learn
Yeah.
more. Contact your local elected officials. Follow transportation policy.
Transportation.
Transportation policy and housing policy is
Mhm.
inexplicably tied to each other.
Mhm.
The type of transportation that we have or don't have will determine the type of housing. It kind of influences the type of housing that we
Wow,
have
that's really
and how
fascinating.
housing is spread out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So here is my favorite takeaway from this story: the power of civic participation. Community members, with the support of local nonprofits, advocated for a study with the county. The county did the study, and from the study came up with this preventative model of services: money to build affordable housing, shelters, know your rights, and even some money set aside for first time homebuyers. First of its kind, right? Then, as with any bond tax financing, it has to go before the voters, as it did in 2016. Voters approved it. Then the county formed an oversight committee made up of folks with lived experience, as well as other county residents and experts and county staff. Together, these folks made sure that not only was the Measure A implementation plan relevant, but also that every penny was spent well. It's a lot of process, but at every point, there was an avenue for civic participation and in the project. I also really love that this case study as a whole story example of how change is made within a system as large and complex as our government. And it's not just about public comment or voting. It's a study, it's trying new things, it's being on a commission, it's working on implementation, gathering lessons learned, etc. There are many roles to be filled within our democracy, and it truly requires a collective of active participants for it to function well and in our favor. So, is everything in Santa Clara County perfect? No, of course not. Expecting perfection in government, I think, is even more delusional than believing in utopia. I don't believe in perfection because, we don't live in a utopia. But what I do believe is with consistent effort, that is learning and failing and trying again, progress towards our goals, whatever that may be, can be made. And Measure A is a truly great case study for this. We saw what was happening. We chose to do something different. It was the first of its kind in the nation attempt, a try. To anyone who's ever practiced art, throwing pottery, learning music, or, your first piece is hardly ever your magnum opus. But as long as it's not your last piece, as long as you keep at it, keep developing the practice, learning from your past endeavors, you will progress. But I will say for Santa Clara County, not too bad for a first try. So at that point in time, in 2015, 2016, the point in time count for our house population was around 5 to 6,000 people. Since then, there have been 56 projects across 10 cities, 534 new apartments, 689 renovated apartments. And as of today, at the time of this episode release, Measure A is on track to fund more than 5,800 units of affordable housing, surpassing its goal of 4,800. And that's all really great for an idea born in 2016. Unfortunately, what we could not have known then is that a global pandemic was looming, unprecedented fires, a halt and complete reorganization of the economy, massive job losses, inflation, and the list goes on. The new point in time count puts our unhoused population at nearly 10,000, and that's as of 2023. The point in time count happens across the country every 2 years in January. The most recent point in time count that took place was January 2025, with approximately 721 volunteers participating in this year's count, including 292 with lived homeless experience. These numbers are going to be released this summer, so they're not out yet. Needless to say, we are in a completely different territory now. The rate at which people are becoming unhoused is faster than the rate the city or the county can build new affordable housing. So, what does that mean? It means it's an all hands on deck situation, and no one is coming to save us. We are the heroes we have been waiting for. So, if this is your niche, if this is your calling, you can heed Betty's call. There are plenty of avenues to get involved. And you've already come to one of the best places to get started. Look at you. So, go check out our show notes for the resources and the different places that you can get involved. Okay, um, alrighty, folks. So this is a wrap for this episode. If you enjoy this episode, please hit that like, that follow button, leave us a comment or questions. And Only in Santa Clara County is, again, a sister project of Only in San Jose. So you can check us out at www.onlyinsj.org. We are a listener-supported nonprofit. If you want to support our work, you can make a tax-deductible donation or volunteer with us. Alrighty, folks, until next time.